YouTube? Welcome back to the shop and another Blades to Be video. Fairly quick one tonight. Just going to go and talk through measuring inside diameter using a variety of different tools. On the Hobby Machinist forum on there was a couple of threads going on this week talking about measuring ID, getting accuracy, using some different tools. So I thought, hey, what the heck? It'd be a great idea to put a video out there and talk through it. Maybe help some people out, get a visual on some of these different tools. To be clear up front, I do not have any ring gauges, so I just found a couple items around the shop that we're going to measure the inside diameter of. And to be honest, I looked around, I don't have a whole lot of things that are 1-inch diameter or larger that I have handy. I had some hubs that I made, but those are not here right now. Those are already gone with the customer. But what I do have is I have the inside diameter of my 4-jaw chuck, and then I moved a couple of jaws out and we can measure those as well to get out to closer to a 6-inch diameter simulation of a bore to measure. So I'm going to turn the camera around and let's take a look at some of the measuring tools on the table, and let's get in here and talk through using each of those different tools to measure the inside diameter. Before we do that, if you like the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos on machining, shop tools, measuring, things like this, reviews of different tools, trying to do all things machining. And if you have ideas for videos, something you'd like to see, hey, drop that in the comment section. Always looking for new ideas. Want to make sure that I'm putting out videos that are of interest and offer value. So let's go ahead and turn the camera around and dig into this. So let's take a quick look at some of the tools that we're going to be using. We're going to use a telescopic gauge to measure that inside diameter. So spring loaded, pops open, and then you turn the knob on the end to lock that in place. Pull that through your bore, and we'll use that and we'll measure that with a micrometer to get the reading across the outside. We're going to use a couple of different sets of inside calipers. These are screw adjustment. So typically when I've used these before, it's if there's something in the hole and you've got to measure around that, so you're not able to get in there across the bore with a telescopic gauge or with an inside micrometer, and sometimes you have to get around that to be able to measure. These are spring loaded, you've got a nice screw to adjust there, and going to measure across that with a micrometer again to get your reading. We're going to use a set of digital calipers. Obviously that's probably one of the handiest things you have around the shop, and very, very good accuracy. We'll see how the accuracy of this compares with using an inside micrometer, some of these other tools, and just some of the advantages and disadvantages. And we'll use an inside micrometer. So this inside micrometer, it's adjustable. Right now I've got a piece in there for up to a 2-inch bore. And you can change out the legs in this and you can get all the way up to a 12-inch bore with this particular set. It does have a spacer, so it goes in 1/2-inch increments. Unlike an outside micrometer where the dial has a full inch reading, this one only has a 1/2-inch reading. So you put a spacer on there to make up for that other 1/2 inch. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And I think that's all our pieces and parts. So those are the tools that we're going to use to measure. Let's get this turned around, get it lined up. Let's see what we're actually going to measure with all of those different tools. All right, so to get started on this, let's start with our digital calipers. Theoretically, we want to work from our least accurate to our most accurate. So probably our least accurate would be these spring inside calipers, but that's a little bit of a different angle with the camera. So let's start with our digital calipers and then we'll work those next, and then we'll go to the telescopic gauge, and then we'll go to our inside mic. So first we're going to take a look at the smaller of the two bores on this. So let me spin this a 1/4 turn to get it lined up across there. Now, with the Vernier caliper, we're going to use our inside measurements. We have limitations on how deep you can get into a bore to do that. I've got this lock screw on top that limits how far I can get it in. I'm limited by the length of these jaws. That's actually why we can't measure it from the backside with our calipers, because there's a taper on the backside and the jaws just are not long enough to get in there. So we're going to do what we can. There's a big radius on the front, but we're just going to have to hold this out a little bit, and there's still plenty of jaw in there to get a good measurement. Now what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try to anchor one jaw, and I'm only going to move one side. That way I'm getting a good reading. I'm trying to find that largest point on that circle, and if I'm moving both sides, you're sort of fighting back and forth, and it's going to be harder to find that. So you want to anchor one side, get that nice and straight, and we're just going to move that back and forth. There we go, we got that lined up, and I'm getting a reading there of 2.167. Feels good. I've got that straight, got it anchored on one side. So 2.167 is what I'm getting for a reading across that small diameter. Let's write that down. Now we'll straighten our piece up here. Now looking at a larger diameter, we're just going to go across the inside of these two jaws. Not a complete circle, but we definitely have a good arc there. Going to give us the same concept. When you're measuring a circle, you're only measuring that very small little part. So good practice to actually measure inside of something like this. Give you the idea of what it is you're measuring across. So I'm going to use this first notch on the jaws as my depth. Same thing, I'm going to anchor that far jaw. And I'm going to rock this back and forth. Get that lined up nice and straight. And I'm getting 5.944. There we go. I'm getting 5.9445 across there. Again, looking at that, I think I've got that depth nice and straight. So 5.9445, let's write that down. Now let's go ahead and change this camera angle so you can look right through the bore, and let's see what we get with our inside spring calipers and the telescopic gauge and that inside mic. Okay, I think that should give you pretty good visibility in there on what's happening with the tool as we're going to work it across this bore. Now again, the first one we're going to use is these spring calipers. Now typically when I'm using spring calipers, I'm not going to use them straight in this way, because the reason I'm using them is because I went around something that was in the way. That would be why I would use spring calipers. So if I'm going around something, then I'm going to be using these more upright. When I use the inside mic and the telescopic gauge, those are going to go more straight across. So because we've got this good angle on the camera here, we're going to go in, we're going to set all of our tools, and then we'll pull everything out, and then we'll use the micrometer to measure across all of them at once, and we'll see how they compare. We'll see how we did in getting our feel through the bore and what's our most accurate reading. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to anchor one leg of these inside calipers, and then I'm going to walk it back and forth to find where is the center, where is that largest diameter on there. So I touch there, so somewhere in between is where I need to go to get my reading. Now I typically set it so that I can go through where I don't touch, and I'm going to work my way out to find the diameter. So if I go right there, I'm getting touch that far apart, but I am not getting any contact in between. So I'm going to open those up a little bit. Touch, touch, touch. Come across. Going for just that lightest feel in there. All right, I think I have those set. Now let's get in here with our other piece with our straight leg. And these are quite a bit too big right now. Get those down. So I'm just turning that thumb screw. I've got it anchored. Got my other hand adjusting. Okay, now I've got no contact. So I touch, touch. Somewhere in about there is going to be the center. So once I find that center, that's where I'm going to rock it through. And I want to pay attention to how much I feel when I'm putting it through, because that's what I want to put it through the micrometer with, that exact same feel when I measure it. Alright, so I've got that where I'm happy with that measurement. So now I'm going to go in here with my telescopic gauge. So the telescopic gauge, I'm going to put that together. I'm going to tighten that up, put it in my bore. I'm going to put it in there on an angle. I'm going to open that up on the angle, and I'm just going to, while it's still unlocked, I'm just going to move that around a couple times until I'm satisfied that I've got that in the, more or less in the center. But I'm on an angle. So once I lock it and pull it through, I'm only going to do that one time. So I'm centered, I'm going to lock that right there. I'm going to pull that through one time. And that is set. So we've got that one through. Now I'm going to get my inside micrometer. So we're going to 2.167, so I don't need to put my 1/2 inch spacer. So I'm just going to put my 1 to 2 inch leg in there. And with my inside micrometer, same thing. I'm going to anchor one end, and I'm going to find center and pull that through so I have no touch there. And I'm going to work my way out until I get contact in that bore. So again, there's touch, touch. So between those 2 points is the center, nothing. Closer, so now I've only got that much movement between my touches, so I'm getting close. Touch, 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 touch. And there's the center point. That's a little tight. Let me back that off. Touch, 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 and it's just a little loose again. And that was only a half thou change. So you talk about the accuracy of your inside mic. The difference between a half thou movement was no touch at all and too tight to feel it goes through there. Okay, so again, touch, touch, touch. I keep wiggling that back and forth. I'm keeping one end anchored. So now I'm here where I have no more movement and I'm pulling that straight through. That's the feel I'm looking for that inside mic. And that is about 2/10 different from where it was really noticeably tighter than I wanted to try to force that through there. Alright, we now have all of those measuring instruments set. Let me pull that camera back out and then let's go ahead and measure with our micrometer across all those, see how they compare. Alright, so let's go ahead and measure across these different tools and see how they compare. So for these inside spring calipers, I'm basically going to hold that and I'm going to pinch that up against the fixed end of my micrometer. And I'm going to open that up and I'm going to move that through. Again, I'm trying to get that same feel that I had in that bore. So there, I'm just getting some touch through there. So that's at 2.167. So that's the same that I had with the digital calipers. Let's get our straight leg over here. Same thing. And I'm getting about 67.5 with those. So I'm getting about a half thou different with these ones. Let's go with my telescopic gauge. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm holding that anchored against one end of the mic. This one I'm about 16 4/10, so I'm about 2.1464. Let me write some of these down before I forget. So the round, I was 2.167 on the straight, 2.1675 on the telescopic, 2.1664. And then on my inside micrometer, now I know that inside micrometers are a direct read instrument and you can read directly off of them, but I have never done that and was always taught to never do that. Couple of reasons. Alright, I get 2.1665. How does that compare with my direct read? Yeah, it's about 5 thou different than my direct read on there. Alright, so 1.665. Now with this inside micrometer, even though it is a direct read instrument, you have a lot of parts that you're constantly changing on here. You're pulling this out all the time. You've got a 1/2 inch spacer that you're putting on there. You have all different rods. You can get a little bit of dirt buildup on the back side of this. You can get a little bit of dirt buildup on this face. There's a lot of things that can impact it going together. and you don't always have a set of ring gauges or something with you to constantly calibrate this, because you can calibrate it just like any micrometer, you can turn it. But I was always taught, why do that? Why invest the time in doing that? You're going to have your outside micrometer there. Just measure it with your outside micrometer. Plus, if you're trying to turn two pieces to fit together, your outside micrometer is probably going to be calibrated. They tend to lose calibration much less than an inside mic. So that's already going to be calibrated, and if you're using the same micrometer to measure your inside diameter and your outside diameter on two mating parts, you're just going to improve your accuracy there. So I've always just used an outside micrometer to measure this, even though it is a direct read instrument. I've never used it as a direct read. And by the same token, it comes with this fancy little arm that you can put on there. You can take off this stud off the other side. You can use this arm to reach further into a bore, and if you needed to reach way into a smaller hole where you couldn't get your hand in there, then this would be possible to use, and you can hold that out there like that and manipulate it. But again, unless you absolutely have to use something like that, I've always held onto it here, anchored one side, and manipulated it that way. So that's how I would do the inside micrometer. All right, so across those 4 different tools, or across our 5 different tools actually, so across our 5 different tools, we ended up with 2.167, 2.167, 2.1675, 2.1664, 2.1665. So we ended up a total of 1 thou difference from our, I guess 1 thou and a tenth. So we ended up 1 thou and a tenth difference from our largest to our smallest. And if I had to trust anything to be what I feel most accurate measuring with, it would be that inside micrometer. So for my inside mic, my telescopic gauge was within a tenth of that. And with my inside spring calipers, I was within half a thou of that. So I feel pretty good about that, being able to use my spring calipers to get within half a thou. And if my digital calipers out here on this radius, not surprised that those are off by that half thou as well. I would say that is still pretty good accuracy across those different instruments. All right, let's take a look at measuring across a larger diameter, and then we'll wrap this up. All right, well, let's move on to measuring the larger hole on this. So we're going to have one less tool to use. These small calipers aren't going to get in there to measure that large bore across here. So we already have our measurement with the digital calipers, 5.9445. So let's get in there with our larger spring calipers, and we'll see what we can get across that measurement with that. Same thing, I've got a long ways to go. Take the pressure off of there, and we'll roll that out a little bit. All right, well, that got me close. So again, I'm going to anchor one side, and I'm going to focus my movement on the other. Get that close. And you can see that even just with this section of a circle that I have here, I've got contact there, nothing in between. We'll make our little adjustment. It doesn't take much adjustment. Trying to do that with one hand. It doesn't take much turning that screw at all. So again, I've got touch, touch. I know where my center point is. And I can just get that to pass through with no sound, no touch at all. I think I've got just a little too much there. There, I'm happy with that reading. So get touch, touch, get in between. Just making some contact. So let's see what we end up with for a mic reading there. So again, I've got this anchored on one side, and we're going to just pass this through. Now I'm just barely had contact, so I can just feel that. Right there, I can just get that to catch as I go through the mic. Which is what I had, was barely a drag. So that is 943 and maybe 8/10, so just under 944 is what I'm getting with that. So there is our spring caliper. Now let's take a look at our telescopic gauge in this same hole. So since my telescopic gauge is almost at the maximum of its extension here, I'm not actually going to try to spring it open in this space. I'm just going to push that down to get it in here. So, and I don't really have to wiggle it around too much. I mean, again, they're more or less self-centering. And since I am already on such a small spot over there, I'm just going to get that in place, lock that, and then I'm going to pull that through one time. And let's see what we get for a measurement on this one. So on my telescopic gauge, again, I'm going to have a little bit more pressure because I know how much pressure it took for me to pull that through the hole. So it's a little bit tighter than it was with that spring caliper. So I'm getting a reading of 944 with that. Write some of these down before we forget. Alright, so now for my inside mic. Same thing, I'm going to be anchoring that on this side over here. So I'm going to anchor that. And I'm going to go to where I can wiggle that back and forth. So I'm not passing anything, I'm not touching anything there. Go up about a half thou. Still not making any contact. Go up another half thou. Well, still passing through there clean. So you can see on that up down, it's very easy to move that up and down and figure out where I need to be in the center. And once I get to that center, I can pass it through still with no touch. Alright, so now, once I get to there, I've got pretty much no up and down. It's got contact the whole way, and yet still just barely touches when I get it straight through there. So I'm close. So I'm going to go up just another, I'm going to go up a full half a thou from there. So I'm on my direct read, I'm going to be between 22 and 23. I'm going to go right to 23. So that's a half thou. And now, let me try to get it from the back side. So yeah, with that half thou difference, I can't even get it to start in there anymore. So that half thou made that much of a difference that I can't even get it in there. Let me back off again. So I backed off, not quite the full half thou. And I get that centered, and that's a little tighter. So if I go back fully to the 22 and a half, got no movement. That's just a little tight there. So there I've got that where I think that feels, I'm just getting some nice push through on that. It holds itself in there, but that's a nice feel going through. Let's measure that and see where we ended up with our micrometer. So I'm coming out at about 43 8/10, and it's just where that mic will pretty much just hold itself in there, but it comes right back out. So that's about the same feel we had in the bore as well. So again, it just almost doesn't want to stay, but when you get it in there, it'll just barely hold itself in there for that same feel that we had going through that bore. So 5.9438. So if we look at our final results on that, out here on this larger diameter, the calipers, you know, they were really reading somewhere around 44. We pulled them, we got them out to that 445 reading one time. But even with that, we were 438, 435, 944, 945. So we were within. So we only had a 1 thou variance across all of our different measuring instruments, even when you get out to a bore of that size, almost a 6-inch diameter bore. You're only looking at about a 1 thou variance across different tools to do that. And the technique, pretty much always the same. You're always anchoring on one side of the bore. You want to make sure that you're not fighting movement both ways. You want to try to anchor on one side and get all of your movement to find the center, with the exception of the telescopic gauge where you're doing that on an angle. You let that center, and then that is a one time you're going to pull that through, and with the rounded ends it's going to center itself. So hopefully that gave you some ideas on how to accurately measure inside diameter with some different tools. Well, YouTube, that wraps up another video here in the Blades to Be shop. I hope you enjoyed watching on how to use some different tools for measuring inside diameter. Gave you some thoughts, ideas on how you're going to do that in your own shop. Ultimately, the goal is just to get that consistency no matter what tool you're using, no matter what size diameter bore you're measuring. You want to make sure that you are confident in the readings you are getting with your tools. As always, appreciate you watching and love the comments that are coming through on the channel. If you've got a video idea, you've got a suggestion, just have a question, please feel free to drop that in the comments, or you can reach out and contact us on the bladesToBe.com website using the Contact Us form there. Happy to answer questions and always happy to get some new ideas. If you like the videos, want to see more videos on machining, measuring, just other general work we're doing here in the Blades to Be shop, please hit that subscribe button. Trying to get videos out for you every Saturday morning. Look for a new video this Saturday morning, 27 March, on getting the most from your DRO, understanding tool offsets, DRO calculations to get that CNC type repeatability from your manual lathe. So until that next video comes out, I hope you're out in your shop making some projects of your own. Keep your tools sharp, keep your mind sharper, and we'll talk with you soon. Take care.